I want to thank you for taking the time to join today's webinar on Infor Human Capital Management, Next Generation Payroll, and a very exciting guest presenter here today, Ms. Ihlen from Infor.
Thank you.
She's the Senior Director of HCM Product Management. Without further ado, I give you Amy and Richard.
Thank you.
Thanks, Keith. Thanks, Richard. Very excited to be here at RPI Consultants. We've got some fabulous information that the team's been working on over the past 12 months that we're looking to share. Much of information that we talked about in our recent user conference with Inforum, but a little bit new detail that we're going to share with you today. So thanks for having me. I'm super excited.
Oh yeah, and thanks so much for coming, and we are really looking forward to this.
Good.
So,
Payroll seems to be important to a lot of people, so we definitely want to spend some time talking about it. All right, first and foremost, just a little bit about nomenclature and clarity. What we're talking about in this session is a carryover from a roadmap session I did about an hour ago. But more importantly this is the new payroll that will be developed and delivered as part of our go forward Cloud Suite HCM, i.e. for those of you that are familiar with version 11 or Landmark as a technology framework, this is that solution. So I'll talk a little bit about what that looks like. But here's some examples on the screen that will show you what's there currently, not yet released, from mobile capabilities, but let me elaborate and tell you more. So as all good product people must do, we have to make sure that you understand a lot of what Richard and I are going to share with you today is future looking. Now that being said I'll make sure we distinguish between what's coming out sooner than later and then what's a little bit further down the line into probably 6 months, 12 months, and 18 months increment. This is simply to reflect that we may have things that influence our strategy and our market, but we certainly will keep everyone informed of that. All right, let's talk payroll.
Yeah.
So this is 4 parallel paths. For those of you that were on the roadmap discussion a little bit earlier today, I covered this. For those of you that weren't, I'm going to go into detail on each one of these and break it down. But first thing is, this is an extension of our global HR solution. So we are not creating a separate module of payroll, much like some of our legacy products had, whether that be Lawson or something else, but simply an extension of global HR. So this is a new set of capabilities that we are extending. This is primarily focused on the markets that we've always addressed, primarily US and Canada, but will extend to other countries opportunistically as we move forward. Right. So that's one path. Second path is, of course, we need the tight coupling with our Cloud Suite Finance. This is important from an ERP perspective, but most importantly, when we look at a shared accounting structure, by nature of writing this on the new framework, we inherit different things related to resource record, to general ledger, things that you would expect. So we're super excited as that continues to evolve. Third parallel path is around industry specialization. So Richard and I were just talking about this before we kicked off the webinar, is the criticality to deeply understand the business challenges or nuances, dare I say, right, that we see in some of our target industries.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we know that payroll for a K-12 public school system is pretty different than payroll for a healthcare organization.
Exactly.
Even though they both benefit from the same kind of software.
Exactly. So we will continue to go after our target industries as we always have. As Richard alluded to, teacher contract pay is something that becomes important as we continue to evolve this. Tips and tokes in different industries where those are relevant, and the ability to manage, the triangulation of scheduling and shift swapping and deductions coupled with pay becomes relevant. So that's the third path. Last and certainly not least, we can't come to market with a strong and competitive solution without the success and the partnership of some of our other solution partners. So we will continue to strengthen our relationship with BSI as a tax provider. We also are happy to share with you an announcement that came out a few months ago about our new partnership with ADP to offer global payroll in those countries and regions where it's relevant. So I'll qualify that a little bit as we get further along. That's strictly for outside the markets that we write for, US and Canada. And then last and certainly not least is we have a new partnership with a company called Iron Road, who has implemented our Cloud Suite HCM. And they are going to be another option for us for value-added services.
Great.
So payroll isn't just about writing some feature functionality. There's a lot involved with it. Super excited as we continue to move that forward. So let me break this down a little bit further and add some clarity. So what do we mean by a rewrite? This is a picture that shows our core Cloud Suite HCM solution and all the modules or the categories that come with it. As you see here, we have payroll as its own column that will suggest what are the capabilities that were once maybe on a different technology framework or function differently. The evolution of this is essentially to extend our core over here on the left-hand side with Global HR to include all those components. So as the picture shows, it essentially goes away.
Great.
Now, the advances of this will come over time. I'll break that down a little bit further. But you can see here is that we will no longer be in the business of standalone payroll. We simply will extend a foundation that has been in the market since 2007 and make sure that it has everything you would expect for pay and deductions, for gross to net calculation, for processing of checks, for processing of W-2 tax, and everything that comes along with it for our target countries. So. All right, how are we going to do this? First and foremost, we are making sure that we have a like for like, so to speak, comparison of what once was loss in payroll. I think many of you as attendees are familiar with and have known to love over the 30 plus years that it has been in the market. Now, that being said, we will, by nature of this extending on the platform that we have and the modernized technology, you will see enhancements. Yeah. So it will not function the same way as it once did. Dare I say, and you know this and your whole team, is our legacy loss and payroll was independent screens, right? That all had to be coupled together, and you'd have to be trained and learn to go from one screen to the next screen to the next screen. Yeah. By nature of it being on the Go Forward tech stack is you'll inherit some, we call them wizards just because it's fun, but some capabilities for workflow to guide the user through the process.
Yeah, that's, across all of Cloud Suite, that's a big advantage that we're seeing is it's a process-driven application. It's an application that's designed around the workflow that you have rather than relying on the staff to be the workflow.
You're absolutely right. So there's efficiencies, Richard, right? Mm-hmm. Gaining it is being able to, I can expedite the process, whether it's calculating the gross to net or processing or the close or the year-end process or whatever it might be. It's going to give me a guided tour, right? Now, with the like for like rewrite is we'll start there. By nature, again, as I mentioned, you'll get some incremental enhancements, but then we're going to continue to enhance further. And I'll talk a little bit about that and some of the strategic things that Dan Bruting, who leads this effort, and his team are doing. That being said, is we won't forget about our customer base. Many of you that are on the phone and through our partners like RPI are certainly going to have to migrate clients, right? So how do we take all the goodness of what you've had over time and make sure that you can migrate that data? It's not disruptive. You're confident in the integrity of that data. So we will include definitely a migration tool set to make sure that that's relevant. Now, some of the strategic enhancements that you'll see will come into the complexity of how do we address the needs of the workforce? For example, we all know, and hopefully you've heard, that a lot of the makeup of workforce has changed and will continue to change. And a lot of people we may not pay that work for us, or we might pay in a different way. Mm-hmm. Might be on a pay card. It might be something related to maybe I could process pay through GL and not the traditional means of cutting a paycheck. So let's talk a little bit about that. So some of the strategic enhancements, and then I'm going to give you some views so that you're well aware that this is very real, and I'm also going to share a timeline of when this is coming up. So some of the strategic things that we're working on, much like I mentioned, this wizard concept, right, where I can step through a process and it'll take me from step to step and I don't have to think about it, or do I have to depart from one screen going to the next? We're going to look at some things related to paycheck modeling. Now, for fun, I've received feedback from customers and partners says, that sounds great, Amy. I'd love to model my paycheck and tell you what ideally it should be. That's not what we mean. We mean the ability, excuse me, to look at a shift or look at a schedule and predict what your pay is going to be if you either change shifts or schedules, but also if you modify anything related to your deductions, what might your pay look like? So we're super excited and we think our customers are going to be happy about that. We of course won't forget about retroactive pay and all the other different things that will impact calculations, such as leave adjustments or the ability to, excuse me, much like I said, interact with my pay and know exactly what's coming in. So these are just a few of a very healthy pipeline of enhancements that we've received and the team is working on. Now that being said, is we have consumed a lot of the enhancement requests that you have submitted as customers and as partners. Don't forget that we haven't forgotten about all those and we're taking them all into consideration. So should we take a look?
Yeah, let's see what
it evolves into. All right, so the new UX and UI, this isn't it, is taking what was an earlier version of our core HR and payroll solution to the next level. So you'll see this morph into the ability to tailor the view into something that's relevant. For example, you will start seeing how employees and managers and different people can identify and customize their page, which will give them quick links into the things that are most relevant. In this example, I might want to look specifically at a person, which we call a resource, right? Call them a resource because we may pay them, we may not, or they might have different relationships with our organization.
Yes.
The new pay structure and the usability around it will categorically bring different processes together and couple them into a way that will make it easier to process. For example, what you're seeing on the screen is step one of the overall pay structure. And as you look at this, you can actually see how these are related to the combination of pay codes and now all located on one page versus having to go from screen to screen to screen. Another example is that the pay structure from Global HR that has always been there is expanded now to support payroll. So we had a pay structure because we needed it for core system of record. We needed it to track what people's pay were based on work assignment. Now we're extending it to make sure we can look at things like pay classes, summary groups, shift tables, and other elements that are relevant to processing pay. Look better?
Yeah.
Okay, good answer.
Bringing it all together.
All right, so beyond what we've already started to develop, and oh, by the way, we are securing and have solidified a couple of our beta customers. So let's talk about the timeline with this. Here's what we're looking at next. So in January of 2019, Richard, that's only a couple weeks away.
Yeah, tell me about it.
I look at my watch like it's going to tell me it's only a couple weeks away. But in January, we are going to be in a readiness state to kick off our first beta. We're super excited. This will deliver incrementally, month by month, more and more capabilities in the hands of our beta customers to test. And oh, by the way, don't forget, Infor is a beta customer. So we are drinking our own champagne, as I like to say. We're eating our own cooking, or what other metaphor you want to use, but we are going to be cutting our own paychecks. So we will make sure this is pristine and accurate. Now, that being said, is the beta version will focus first on our multi-tenant customers. This is a question that I get almost every conversation that I have. Are you continuing to develop this both in the cloud and on premises? The answer is yes, but we're focused first on the multi-tenant and cloud version of the product, which I think is all kinds of value comes along with that.
Yeah, that totally makes sense, and that gives you a nice contained environment to be able to work through issues and make the product the best it can be before letting it out in a more a deployment scenario that might be unique from one client to the next.
Exactly. You couldn't have said that any better. That's exactly our thought process, is that we can control it. We can make sure we're getting an appropriate degree of feedback and everything that's relevant. Now, after a few months of the beta process, we'll get to a point, we'll make the decision of whether we feel this is ready for the market for likely a subset of our customer base and or different regions. That being said, our target is July of 2019. So we're looking at a 6-month beta cycle. Now that being said, is we've already had this beta customer and Infor involved in our lead adopter activities. So it's not like January is the first time that these folks are going to see it. They've been partnering with us along with other clients over the past 9 to 12 months to make sure we're designing things accurately. We're taking into account, much like you brought out, some of the industry nuances and specialization. So with the soft launch, dare I say, or the general availability for US only customers in July, we'll continue to enhance and extend, again, monthly. We'll go out with a second release, which will include some of the elements that are industry specialization. So much like you mentioned, K through 12, right? We also look at state and local government. We look at some of the things that become important for tips processing. We look at things that's relevant to healthcare, like you said, and some of the, not only the small and community hospital, but larger health systems and children's care units, and make sure that we include those in the enhancements for a 2020 release. The other thing that we're working on for January 2020 with Release 2 is to continue our investment and include industry specialization for federal, industry specialization extended for hospitality and retails, which is taking that tips and tokes process and bringing that to another area. So just to recap this real quickly, because that was a lot of me talking. January, we're starting beta.
Yeah.
With 2 customers. July is our first targeted general availability release. The following January will be our second release. Make sense, Richard?
Yeah,
All
that's
right.
straightforward.
So breaking that down, this is just detail that I believe will be included as we continue to share the information from this webinar. There's specific customer updates that you're seeing in the CU. This will also include related to foundational components. Biggest consideration here is, again, start talking about this is extending my global HR. This is extending a solution that I already has as system of record. So for those of you that attended our webinar earlier today, we kicked off the session with a concept of human potential and what that means. So we're going to talk about our payroll potential for fun. What does this do for you as a customer? What does it do for anyone that's consuming this? Our concepts are that the experiences of interacting or knowing what's coming in your paycheck, right?
Yeah.
Knowing how your deductions are going to impact your pay, first and foremost, are top of mind for us, right? Any type of worker, whether you're hourly or salaried or incremental or seasonal, everyone wants to know the end in mind. Right?
Yeah, I'd say payroll is probably first for employee satisfaction.
Exactly, for engagement and
Yes.
satisfaction. Otherwise, we'd be volunteers.
Right.
Isn't that how it goes? Okay. Second vision that we're focusing on is leveraging some of the more modernized technology for artificial intelligence. As hopefully many of you know that have attended this, our digital advisor with Infor Coleman. That's the second. I'm going to show you some concepts that we're working on with that. The third is making sure that we can extend this not only within our Infor HCM portfolio, but across any Infor cloud suite. So whether that's cloud suite corporate or healthcare or public sector or manufacturing or anything beyond, is that payroll becomes critical to the launch of those cloud suites. And then last and certainly not least is the analysis. How does payroll and the elements related to deductions and benefit plans and who's enrolling and all the big data around it, how does that become absolutely imperative from an analytics perspective?
Yes.
So these are 4 concepts that I want to show you some screens.
I'd love to see some screens.
Okay, so let's start with the first concept around experience. Today, you can view your paycheck on a phone or a tablet or a desktop, any device. That's generally available today. You have the opportunity to do that. What we'd like to do is we'd like to extend that to make sure that you can chat and ask questions about your pay. If I see a discrepancy, if I see something that may be inconsistent from previous paychecks, I can either ask my digital assistants, hey Coleman, what is different about this pay period than last pay period? I could type it in if I'm not able to speak, or if Richard's sitting in my office with me and I don't want him to know what I get paid. I can type it in and I can chat and get a response. Or I can also have some of the experiences that actually are reaching out to me ahead of time and predicting some information that I might want. So that's super exciting from an overall employee experience. From an administrator experience, what we want to be able to do is we want to be more of that augmentation and that advisor. What that essentially means is the power of artificial intelligence isn't just about the digital advisor, which you know. It's about predicting and automating some of the processes that maybe I couldn't automate in the past. For example, as an administrator of payroll, go ahead and start calculating or processing the year end before I click a button. And if something happens, then feel free to send me a notification or alert ahead of time. So these are some of the early proof of concepts. Another example with the digital assistant that you're seeing here is an overtime cost by department, where maybe as a digital advisor, I'm letting a leader know, or a comp analyst, or a payroll administrator, or an executive know that their overtime costs are exceeding or trending in an unfavorable way, right?
Yeah.
We all know how important to be able to correlate our financial results to the work that people are doing is absolutely imperative.
Yeah, absolutely. For most of our clients, workforce is the largest expense.
Yep, exactly. So being able to predict that ahead of time helps me make solid business decisions. And another thing I teed up a little bit around this paycheck modeling concept, what you're seeing here is a couple of scenarios that a user could do. Maybe I want to change my hours. Maybe I want to pick up a shift. Maybe I want to trade shift. Maybe I want to take a day off. You don't ever get a day off, do you, Richard?
No.
Okay, so maybe once you start using this, you can model and say, what's really going to be the impact?
What would it look like if I got days off?
Exactly. Might not impact anything, but you can model that. So we're going to give you options that you're going to tailor as customers, and you're going to say, hey, what options do I want to give my people? Let them model it, and maybe it's a relocation, and then it'll give you the amount. So super excited about that.
Yeah.
That will come post-July. From a roadmap perspective, we're going to get the like for like done first, and then we're going to make it super interesting and cool. Last and certainly not least is I'd like to talk about the power of the big data and the analytics that are coming into play. So as hopefully many of you know, we acquired a company called Burst some time ago. We talked about this a lot. We're so excited because we can take the power of being able to pass data to the data lake, have it consume it. I love the analogy of the data lake just has it make sense to me. Pass it back in a way that's meaningful to let me display it in a way that I want it displayed, allow me to diagnose it in a way that's meaningful to me, and then help me make decisions. When it comes to pay, an example of that might be, hey, based on this pay cycle, what are the stats that become relevant to a leader or a comp analyst? What do I have for deductions in arrears? What do I have that are related to the trend analysis of how much my labor costs are impacting my business? So this is the power of being able to leverage Burst and some of the big data that's going to come along with it in a meaningful way.
Yeah, even the visibility into the payroll cycle, which we're seeing here. I mean,
Exactly.
payroll cycles are complicated. There are a lot of them,
Yeah.
and it's hard to keep track of where everything is at any given point.
Right.
So having that visibility, I think, is really great.
Exactly. So Richard and I talked a little bit earlier about, as a legacy Lawson customer or Infor customer or wherever you're coming from, is the questions that naturally come up. I'm going to ask my own questions,
Go for
okay?
it.
The questions that naturally come up is, one, how do I migrate my own data, right? So we will certainly have tooling. We'll partner with you. RPI will partner with you to make sure that you understand how much of that data you want to migrate over. The second thing is, oh my gosh, I've customized payroll because I have a very unique experience and business practice at my organization. How are you going to deal with the customization? So we talked a lot about our strategy is, one, hopefully we've accounted for most of those customizations already in the product as part of standard, but by nature of moving to the new technology platform, customizations now morph into configurations.
Yeah, we're a big fan. Configurations are at a higher level. They overlay Infor delivered code, and best of all, they're less susceptible to breaking during an upgrade.
Oh, couldn't agree more. Yeah. Exactly. So we'll preserve them as you go through an upgrade, which will happen, or an update. I think our language talks a little bit update from month to month, and we'll preserve your configurations, and then we'll give you an opportunity to turn on new features in place of that. The other question that naturally comes up is maybe some of them are no longer relevant.
Yeah.
So we often will say, what happened to this feature that I once had, or this feature? And it might look different, might be called something different, but you're going to get the same result. So as part of this beta process, as part of having customers that are across all industries participate in our early adopter process, we're going to work through how we help you and train you and teach you what's different and new, and hopefully it's going to be a lot easier than it once was.
Yeah.
So that being said, shout out to the product management and engineering team. This has been a long journey. We're very excited that we're at the point where we can start talking about releasing payroll. I think you've heard this from us for a couple of years now. If you have questions or actively want to be participants in any of our customer programs, we'll reach out to your RPI contacts. They will definitely have our contact info, or feel free to reach out to us directly.
Great.
So with that, I think we'll open it up for questions.
We do have a few questions here. Does ESS time entry move forward into version 11 HCM?
It does. The ESS time entry is already available, generally available in Global HR. Latest release, we're going to shift from version 11 to latest release. It's already there. It will, of course, be extended by nature of the payroll rewrite. So you'll start seeing more and more capabilities and the tight coupling and integration with workforce management, if that's part of the mix too. So.
When is on-premise expected to be available? Is there a timeline for that?
Sure. The timeline for on-premises, I'm not prepared to communicate today. We're going to make sure we've got our cloud solution, powered up and pristine. I do not anticipate it will follow very long after our general availability. So we're addressing both in parallel, but we'll test first in cloud.
I'm gonna paraphrase this question, but basically it's a similar question about Canadian payroll capabilities. When is that expected?
That will be post-July, but before the January 2020 timeline. So our target is, the gap of what we don't have for like in the July release will make up in the 6 month between July and January. And again, these are targets that we'll go after. So.
I got one more I've got a couple more. Encourage everyone to go ahead and get your questions in now while we're on. this one might be a little over my head. How does PR user exit
Let
functionally
Richard take
fit
this
in
one.
the new PR? Yeah.
What is configuration console?
Yeah,
Is it an
exactly.
Yeah,
IPA
so,
or something?
If the question is
feature.
regarding user exits, that there is a similar way to sort of plug into application logic on the Landmark platform as well, and we use the configuration console tool for that.
Yep, exactly. That's a great example of something that might be called something different, might look different, but it's going to achieve the same thing. So you'll, by moving to the more modern technology, you'll have different methods of doing these. Configuration console is super powerful.
Yeah, and it keeps a record of everything that's in there. So that's a big problem we have with COBOL customizations is you don't know they're there, right? You have to separately keep track of them.
Right, very good point.
Yeah.
So this is a great question here for Richard, actually. We answer this all the time. How do we know if our payroll customizations in ESS made it into the new HCM product?
Oh, yeah. They, well, is there a specific example?
No specific example, but I mean, we get this question all the time, and we keep stressing to all our customers that you need to look at customization as, what is the gap that they're filling. That's the easy thing to map to new functionality.
Right.
COBOL code or ESS code is not an easy thing to map to new functionality. You need to know what they're doing, basically.
Right, exactly. So, when we approach the design of, moving to Cloud Suite, basically we try and set a big list of customizations to the side and instead focus on a list of requirements. And map those requirements out to delivered application functionality or a way that we can just design the build of the the setup and everything to meet those requirements first, and then anything that falls out, we look at developing something to meet that.
Couldn't agree more. What we have that discussion often too is again what's already in product, and couldn't emphasize enough. I love how you say that. Focus on the business scenario and the outcome, and likely most of your customizations will no longer be necessary too if we've hit the mark on the product.
So a couple specifics here, so I'm just going to put them out there. So same gentleman asked about customizations is saying secondary approver in manager self-service.
Well, in general, the manager space approvals are driven by IPA, so they're very flexible. There's a lot we can do.
That's all part of your install configuration. Is you can set the number of approvers that you want by business practice. We deliver what we believe best practice or best industry practice is probably a better way to say it, and then you just tailor it. And again, not a customization; it's a configuration, and likely we've addressed it for you already.
And I just want to I don't know if it gets enough attention, but there are hundreds of developed workflows and action requests in Cloud Suite. It's one of the more exciting things about the product from our perspective, and our customers have been very excited to leverage that. Pretty detailed here, but I'm going to ask it. Will there be an option for employees to have both a 401k and a Roth 401k?
Eventually, yes.
Be a little challenging
The
sometimes.
short answer is eventually. We'll address, all kinds of plans definition, and this is coupled nicely with our strategies around the evolution of how we reward talent, because, while that's a great U.S. example, by nature of us being a global solution in a global company, there's synergies with plans that have all kinds of unique requirements that we're addressing not only for Infor, but for all of our global customers. So yes, by nature of us building the pattern and the design to do that, we can accommodate lots of things. It's probably a good way to say it.
That is something that we can help customers do in S3 as well. So if you need help, let us know. This is a great question. Are there pre-built workflows such as onboarding or termination?
Yes.
Yes, there are. And those are available today.
They're available today,
Yeah.
yes.
Transition management.